ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੜੇ ਮਾਣ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਵੀ Colin Gonsalves ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਬੜੇ ਚੰਗੇ ਅਤੇ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਦੋਸਤ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੜੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਊਡ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੁਣ ਖੁਦ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਸੰਗਤ ਨਾਲ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰਨਗੇ। Colin Gonsalves।
Prem Singh Saab, President of the World Sikh Organization, my friends of the WSO, many of whom I have met recently, friends that I have made recently, I thank you for this honor of calling me here to meet with you and speak with you, but it is an honor that I do not deserve. The speaker before me, Navkiranji, young though she is, spoke out against the terror in Punjab from the time she was very, very young. She lived in the Punjab. She spoke out against the butcher of the Punjab, KPS Gill. She spoke out against terror. And when I look at the work done by the persons who have come before me to speak at meetings like this from 1995 onwards, I feel very diffident, I feel very small, because I have done so little work. All that I can say is that when I go back to India, the cases that I do for the Sikh community, the cases that I do for human rights, I will do with greater fervor, with greater energy, with greater inspiration. Although I knew about the work being done by the Sikh community, both in India and Canada, I really did not understand the impact of that work. But this morning I went to the Gurudwara on Dixie Road, and I spent 2 or 3 hours with my friends in the Gurudwara. And as you enter, you see hundreds of Sikh men and women lined up for a blood donation camp, giving blood for the health services in Canada. Nobody has forced them. Nobody has insisted that they give blood. But they are standing there in long queues quietly. Many young people, many old people, all of them donating blood for the public in Canada. You go upstairs to the langar and you see the free food being given to anyone who comes. And I heard stories of people, not from the Sikh community, but people outside the Sikh community who were destitute in Canada, who were hungry, who came to the langar to eat. And they can come in the night, they can come at midnight, and they can come in distress, and they will be treated with dignity like human beings, and they'll be given food and perhaps a place to stay. It is such an inspiring thing that you do. Maybe for you it is normal. For you of the Sikh community, I think it is every day's work. You don't think of it as something very special. But for me, even though I know about human rights and I know about the Sikh community, to see the spirit of serving that the Sikh community has, for me, it was very inspiring and very moving. 2 nights ago, after we had returned from the Ottawa meeting at about 11 o'clock at night, my wife, who's much younger than I am and she is very good on the internet, she put on the computer and went to Google Jaswant Singh Khalra Saab. And I said, I'm tired, Preeti, I'm tired. Can we do it tomorrow? And she said, just wait for 5 minutes, just see what it is. And she went to YouTube and she got his speeches. I'm sure every one of you must have seen his speeches. And it were the 3 speeches that he delivered in Canada before he went back to India and martyrdom. To those of you who are outside the Sikh community here today, you must know that there were many disappearances in the Punjab, thousands of disappearances. And KPS Gill said that they are not people whom we have captured, they are not people whom we have killed, they are people who are in America, they are in Canada, they are in India, working illegally. They are migrants. We have nothing to do with their missing. And Khalrasa went relentlessly after the data. And he could not, for a long time, he could not get the data. And then he stumbled across the cremations that took place in the crematoriums of 3 districts of Punjab, where the persons running the crematorium told him that the police came in trucks with dead bodies, dumped the bodies. And the police were so bold, so arrogant as to give their names. So the names were recorded and the number of bodies were recorded. And all these persons who were actually in the custody of the police and burned were said to be missing. That data he could not show in India. It was dangerous. He would have been eliminated on the spot had he shown that data in India. So he came to Canada. And in 1995, with the parliamentarians and so on, Khalrasa revealed all the information that he had. I am told that when he was in Canada, after his speech, electrifying speeches, when I heard his speech, you really feel very, very small. We're all, I suppose, human rights activists, we're all equal in that sense, but you understand the nature of the man and the nature of martyrdom. He was told, don't go back to India because you will be killed. And he said, if I don't go back, who will reveal the story of the killings and the disappearances? I must go back. And he went back to India. He was picked up in the morning. He was taken away, tortured and killed. The case against KPS Gill still pens in the High Court. The case to bring this man to justice, no matter how old he may become, but to bring the biggest criminal of this century to justice. We hope, we pray, and we will work together to see one day that this man is behind us. Why do we talk about 1984? Why do we again and again remember 1984? Massacres, largest democracy in the world, city of Delhi. The army garrisons are stationed outside Delhi. The police headquarters in Delhi. The naval chief of staff, the army chief of staff, the air force chief of staff, the home minister, defense minister in Delhi. In a minute, after the prime minister or the home minister or the defense minister gives an order, in a minute, the battalions of the Indian army would be there to stop the riots. All that is known, all that is history. No democratic country has had a genocide like this, with the full support of the central government, the full support of the police. All that is history. Why do we talk of 84? So many years have passed. We talk of 84 because the wounds of 1984 have not healed. The pain, the suffering, the grief, the sorrow has not ebbed. And why is the pain not going away? Why is the wound not healing? Because the criminals who killed people, who carried gasoline with them to burn them, who went around with knives and guns to shoot them and kill them, these criminals in India are roaming free. As long as the criminals of 1984 roam free, the wounds of the Sikh community can never heal. As long as the policemen who allowed the killings to take place are not dismissed from service or prosecuted for negligence, criminal negligence, the wounds of the community can never heal. When the criminals who went around in gangs ordering the killing of the community, when these criminals are made ministers and they travel to Canada and abroad representing government of India, when we see that happening, we know that our wounds can never heal. Not because we do not want our wounds to heal, not because we do not want our pain to diminish, but because the government of India will not allow us to be in peace. They will parade these criminals in front of us, give them honors, give the policemen medals, give them promotions for each person that they kill. And as long as we say, our ministers say, that KPS Gill solved the problems of the Punjab, as long as we hear this indignity repeated again and again, our wounds can never heal. And all that we ask is something very simple. All that we ask is, let your criminal justice system operate, independent of who the person is, big or low, mighty or weak. Let the criminal justice system operate fairly and bring the criminals to justice. All that we ask is justice. That is all that it will take for our wounds to heal. There was an indignity done to us recently. I must tell you of the case in the NHRC, which is an important case which has now gone to the Supreme Court. Colin Gonsalves started with his inquiry. It was widely reported in the papers. The matter went to the Supreme Court, where Paramjit Kaur, Colin Gonsalves' wife, filed a petition in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said it is shocking that such a thing can happen in democratic India, that people can be taken and tortured and burnt secretively, ordered the NHRC to investigate. The NHRC formed a team of 5 persons to investigate what should be done, what prosecution should be done, what compensation should be paid. I appeared in that case on behalf of the community to argue first for compensation and second for prosecution. I will deal with it in that order. The Punjab government was so bold as to say that these persons died in our custody. These persons, these hundreds of persons who were cremated, these persons died in our custody. So I asked in cross-examination, if they were with you when they died, how did they die? And you must listen to what the Punjab Government Council said. He said, these persons were enemy agents. I'll just pause here for a while. Enemy agents is a term used for the enemy in war. It is not a term used for persons who were arrested in India for the commission of an offense. If you are arrested for a crime, you are called an under trial. That is to say, you are presumed innocent unless you are proven guilty. These persons were just persons against whom there was a charge leveled but not proved. They had not yet gone to court. They were under trials. So what does the Punjab government say? These persons were enemy agents. We caught them. They were in our custody. Then we took them with us. We took them with us to find out the hideouts of the terrorists. And while taking them with us, the terrorists opened fire and these persons got killed. Ladies and gentlemen, just think about this. This is the clearest admission by a government council that the boys who were under trials were used as human shields. If at all the story is true, that they were used as human shields. And it is a war crime. In international law, it is a war crime to take a person in your custody and use them as a human shield. You will remember in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, there was one case, can you imagine one case, where a young Palestinian boy was captured and then held as a human shield while the Israeli forces were fighting the Palestinian forces. And that became an international incident because one person was used as a human shield. And in our case, hundreds of young persons killed being used as human shields. All right, so after they were killed, what is the compensation to be paid to them? Justice Anand, who was heading the bench, asked me how much should they be paid. I said, sir, a minimum of 10 lakhs as on the date of the killing, somewhere in the 90s, and interest. So it comes to 20 lakhs or 25 lakhs, a small amount for the killing of a person. But I was going by the usual standards given by the courts. You won't believe what the NHRC gave us. The NHRC gave us $5,000. $5,000 for the killing of a person in custody. And then you ask us why our wounds are not healing. You ask us why we cannot move on. You ask us to forget the past. We cannot. Because the insult to the community after the injury, the insult to the community can never be forgiven. I went to a bookstore today and there was a poster on that bookstore. We can never forget. We can never forgive. Not when. You cannot even give us compensation for the death of our boys who were taken from the families. Prosecution we will keep aside for the time being. You cannot even pay compensation. A government which has an 8% GDP growth rate, which was an Asian tiger, is today an international tiger, a world tiger, economic tiger. And you can't even pay compensation for the persons who were dead. Then the NHRC goes on to the second issue of compensation for illegal cremation. What happened was, the bodies were taken. They were taken secretively to the crematoriums and they were burnt. In cross-examination, we asked them, there's the Punjab Police Manual. There are rules for identification of bodies. You have to take the photograph of the face. You have to take the fingerprints of the deceased. You have to take his articles, personal articles, his clothing, his wallet. And you have to advertise in the newspapers and say this person was found dead. This is his photograph. And you have to perhaps take DNA samples so that you can check it to see. They did not do anything. They admit, we have not done anything, sir. We have not taken photographs, we have not taken fingerprints, we have not retained their articles, we have not advertised in the paper. So what does the NHRC do? They pay 1.75 lakhs, few $1,000. 1.75 lakhs for illegal cremation. For violating the dignity of the dead. It's a new branch of international law where the family have rights over the body. All right, you have killed my son. Give me his body. I will take it, and according to the rights of my community, I will do the final ceremonies. And if you violate that right, I have a right to take action against you and get compensation and punish you for violating the dignity of the dead. So 2.5 lakhs for murder, 1.75 lakhs for violating the dignity of the dead, for not informing the parents, for not handing over the bodies to the parents. Then I tell the NHRC, sir, these are separate issues. 2.5 lakhs is for murder, 1.75 lakhs is for illegal cremation. Therefore, I should get 2 lakhs, 2.5 plus 1.75. I should get the combination. Justice Anand says, no, this 1.75 lakhs is part of your 2.5 lakhs. Which means, if you deduct 1.75 lakhs from 2.5 lakhs, the actual amount that I am getting for being murdered in custody is something like 75,000 rupees. If you deduct the part of 1.75 lakhs. This, my dear friends, is a story of the case in the NHRC. This was the second last phase of Khalra Sah's case. Went to the Supreme Court, went to the NHRC. This was the pathetic performance of NHRC. Then we asked the NHRC, open the CBI reports. The CBI investigation is now complete. The CBI has submitted 7 reports to the Supreme Court in sealed covers. NHRC says no, unless the Supreme Court orders us, we will not open the report. Therefore, the prosecution of the policemen of the Punjab is still awaiting the permission of the Supreme Court. This was the fate of the NHRC case. Against the NHRC orders, we went to the Supreme Court. Paramjit Kaur's case in the Supreme Court is pending disposal. And God willing, I am hopeful that in the days to come, perhaps in this year itself, we will get an answer to the questions that we have asked for so long. The prosecution of the police and compensation for those who have died. That is the matter pending now in the Supreme Court. Manmohan Singh came to Canada, I am told, last year. And he told the Sikh community, you must move on. You must forget the past. And I ask, is the 1984 massacre, the genocide of the Sikh people in 1984, is it the past? Is 1984 part of history? Has 1984 become obsolete? Is it an old story that we keep on talking about again and again and again? And I want to develop a point which Navkiranji made when she spoke earlier. 1984 was a testing ground for the Indian state. Testing ground. Can we massacre people on a large scale? Can we try to eliminate a community? Can we do genocide and get away with it? In Indian law, in our Indian legal system, you can shoot a man, you'll be prosecuted, you'll go behind bars. You'll get life imprisonment. But you can try and kill, and you can actually exterminate 3,000, 4,000 people and get away with it. And the lesson of 1984 is that you can actually kill people on a large scale. And if you have political backing of the government in power, and if the police are told to keep silent and not register FIRs and not prosecute, the criminals can get away with it. That is the lesson of 1984. And because in 1984 the guilty were not punished, the government and politicians learned a very important lesson. Might is right. The law does not work when the criminals are from the party in power. So in 1992, when the BJP and the Shiv Sena were in power, 3,000 Muslims were slaughtered on the streets of Bombay. I was in Bombay practicing in the High Court. 3,000 Muslims were slaughtered on the streets of Bombay. Can you imagine? Largest democracy in the world, shining India, rising India. What kind of nonsense is all this? Which country in this world can massacre people like this and call itself a democracy? 3,000 Muslims killed. No legal aid provided. No prosecutions, no convictions. At all. 2002, Gujarat, same story. 3,000 Muslims killed on the streets of Ahmedabad and Baroda. There, to some extent, the human rights community got together and we did prosecutions, but even there, in case after case, the victim community has been threatened. They go to the homes of the victim community and say, if you give evidence against us, we will kill you also. And then they have withdrawn their cases. And in 2007, the attacks on the Christians in Kandhamal, where 150 Christians were killed and their houses were burnt. Would these riots have happened if the 1984 prosecutions had been done properly? Would anyone have the courage to riot if the courts had acted fearlessly? But no. The High Court was not effective. Supreme Court was not effective in these cases. The criminal justice system collapsed. And this government gave full support for all these criminals so that they can be acquitted. Therefore, my dear friends, 84 is not an issue of the past. It's an issue of contemporary India. It's an issue of present-day India. It's an issue for today. Until we confront this weakness in our legal system, in the application of constitutional law, unless we confront it, that we must stop riots from happening in free India, democratic India, unless we stop it once, these riots will never be an aspect of history. These riots will never be something we should forget. We are right when we say we will never forget, we will never forgive, not because of the past, not because of our community alone, but for all Indians, for all communities, that there must never be riots and massacre and genocide of any community in India from this day onwards. That is the message of 84. I want to talk a little bit about stigma. The Indian government has developed a masterful piece of art. First you massacre a community, then you stigmatize the community. And you stigmatize the community in such a way that the community is so busy fighting stigma that they cannot concentrate on prosecuting the guilty. So they'll stigmatize the Sikh community. We are separatists. We are terrorists. They'll stigmatize the Manipuris, who for 50 years have suffered under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. 50 years of rape and murder and killing. I'm doing this case of Manorama, who was raped, young lady, 23 years old. Raped and murdered, shot in the back. I'm doing that case in the High Court. We have won the case, now it's come to the Supreme Court. And you'll remember the Manipuri protests where the Manipuri women took off their clothes and protested in front of the fort, called the Kangla Fort, saying, Indian Army, rape us. You can imagine how bitter they felt for Indian women to take off their clothes and say, here I am, rape us. So the Manipuris, they were stigmatized as being underground agents. First you brutalize them, beat them, kill them, torture them, rape them, and then you say they are underground agents. People in Kashmir, they will say you are insurgents. After doing so much violence to them for so many years, you will stigmatize them. People in Chhattisgarh, Vinayak Sen's case, you remember, you must have read in the papers, one of the world's best pediatricians, working in the remote parts of Chhattisgarh, in Dantewada district, working with tribals on malnutrition. Many films, many lectures, many articles given by him on malnutrition of tribal children, the foremost expert in the country. That you are aiding terrorism. You are waging war against the state. You are guilty of sedition. And why? Because it is said he took a letter from a person in jail whom he was treating. He took a letter and gave it to some underground person. Some innocuous letter, but he took it and he gave it to some. He denies the charge. He says, I've never taken this letter. The police superintendent says whenever he came to jail, he was surrounded by police. We never allowed him to even exchange anything, let alone take a letter. I have never seen any letter being taken by him. He spent 3 years in jail. Case is going on. Supreme Court said, when the matter came up for bail, what is wrong? What has he done wrong? No, sir, he's an Naxal sympathizer. He's a Naxal sympathizer, stigma. Supreme Court said, so what? So what? Is it a crime? Does the penal code make it a punishable offense if you're a Naxal sympathizer? And that, my dear friends, is the aspect of stigma. All of us, all human rights activists, when we go on any television program, the first thing they will say, Mr. Gonsalves, you are the overground face of the underground. You are the front of the insurgents. Why? Because I do constitutional law cases, I do bail applications, I do public interest cases. And in one argument with Mr. Jetli told me all you human rights activists are the overground face of the underground. I said, Mr. Jetli, maybe, let us suppose you are correct. Are you not the overground face of the underground, the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, the Bajrang Dal, the RSS? Are you not the overground face of the underground? And so to conclude, it's the stigma, which is the insult to injury. The stigma that we suffer. Because outside communities look at us and say, these people are up to some mischief. And this is what the government of India is very good at. Killing in the first instance and stigmatizing in the second. I want to say a few words about India. I don't want to say too much about India because I'm sure that most of you travel to India very often. You have friends and relatives there. But I want to say a few words about India as I see it. We are very happy when India does well. None of us, I'm sure, sitting in this audience today is anti-national. We are all proud nationalists. We are proud of our country. We are proud of the position it has in the world. We are proud of the role the Sikh community has played in India to make it a great economic and moral power. We know of our contribution in Canadian society to make Canada a very powerful nation. We want to see India grow, and we are happy to see India position itself in the world as a world power. We heard about the 8% GDP, and we know the wealth that India has. The properties that people own, the cars that they drive, the travel that they do. Our standard of living has gone up enormously. But that, my dear friends, is just one part of one India. The India of 350, 400 million people. Because India today is divided into two parts. The India of the rich and the India of the poor. There was a time, once upon a time, after independence, when we wanted to do nation building, to make our nation great. And by making our nation great, we understood that it meant taking everybody along. Everybody, rich and poor, strong and weak, this caste, this religion, that religion, whatever color you may have, from wherever you may come in the land, in this great land of India, we must take all of you together ahead. And therefore education for all, health services for all, food for all, housing for all, transportation for all, basic services for all India, a unified India, a strong and unified and democratic India. That was the vision of nation building after independence. But today, I would say for the last 20 years, we have a very different notion of making India great. We have an 8% growth rate and immense wealth for 350 million people. But you cannot imagine, even we who are from India, we cannot imagine the appalling conditions under which 750 million people live today in India. The union government appointed Arjun Sen to make a report on poverty. And he made a report in 2010. And he found 77% of the Indian population living on less than 20 rupees a day at 2004-2005 prices, which is 30 rupees a day today. 800 million people living on less than $1 a day, half $1 a day, let's say. The National Family Health Survey results are now out. 50% of all men, women and children are malnourished. 17% of all children are so malnourished, so severely malnourished, that their bodies are stunted and their brains are shrunken. A whole generation of Indians who will grow to adulthood disabled. And in the Punjab, a month ago, when we were doing this case on the right to food, it was found that there was grain being stored out of the godowns because there was no place in the godowns for food. And the rats were eating the grain. The television cameras were photographing the rats eating the grain. And then when we asked the court, I said, Your Lordship, please ask the central government. You have 60 million tons of grain in the godowns. 60 million tons. 50%, half your population is going to bed hungry every day. Give them the grain free. Please ask them to explain why they don't want to give the grain free to these people. And the central government answer was no. We will not do anything. We will not give you the grain free. Let the grain rot. And now the rains will come, the monsoons will come, and the grain will rot again. But we will not give it to people. This is the situation on the hunger front. Globalization has been interpreted by the central government in a very funny way. I can sum it up in 3 words. Subsidies are bad. If the poor want anything, they must pay for it. If they want education, they must pay. Not the duty of the government to pay for education for poor people. If they want medicines, they must pay. If they want food, they must pay. If they want housing, they must pay. But tell me, the poverty line in India today is something for the Punjab, it is 15 rupees a day. Montek Singh Ahluwalia and the Planning Commission have defined poverty line as 15 rupees a day, 1/3 of a dollar. And the Planning Commission says that there are only 40% below 15 rupees a day. Arjun Sen said 77% at 20 rupees. Montek said, no, it's not 70%, it is 40%. And then when you ask him, Mr. Ahluwalia, what is the poverty line? He'll say, for the Punjab, it is 15 rupees a day. So if you earn 16 rupees a day in the Punjab, you are not poverty line, you are not poor, and you do not get a below poverty line card. This is the reality of modern India. This is the farce of modern India. It is a crime. You kill a person, you go to jail. But the Planning Commission and the central government can, by design, by policy, not by accident, can cause hundreds and thousands of people to die of malnutrition and death. And the world, the international community will applaud them and say, wow, sir, 8% GDP, what a magnificent thing you have done, sir. Teach us how to do 8%. It is very simple. I can tell you how to do 8%. Any country in the world can do it. You deprive your poor completely. You take away healthcare, you take away food, you take away education, let them die. And you can get 8%. Is that the model we want? I say that for education you need 6% in India. The government gives 3%. For healthcare you need 6% of your GDP. The government gives 2%. For food you need 6 to 7%. The government gives you 1.5% GDP. I say you spend your money on food, spend it on healthcare, spend it on education. Your GDP will be ultimately, your ultimate growth rate will be 2%. But I say a social democratic growth model, 2% growth with equity is 1,000 times better than 8% growth with no equity, no morality, no stability. That's the economic side. There is another dark side to India. And that is the side of continuing violence. Our Home Minister, P.C. Chidambaram, has declared that 1/3 of the administrative districts of India are under significant levels of armed struggle. 220 of the 650, 660 districts in India are under significant levels of armed struggle. We must pause and think, what has happened to our country? What is happening to India, the largest democracy in the world? People say you have a fair judiciary, a good free press, functioning parliament. Why is it that you have 70% hungry? Why is it that you have 1/3 of the country, the poor, making some crude homemade bombs, making some pistols, sharpening their knives, throwing their spears at the police? Why is it that you have such unrest in our country? Will somebody pause and think? Rather than stigmatize everybody, the Adivasis are with the Naxalites, these persons are insurgents, these persons are separatists, these persons are troublemakers. Will somebody pause and think, what is happening to our beloved country? A country for whom our young boys and girls have given their lives so that this country could be a free country. What is happening to our beloved country? Terrible levels of violence. And in the Punjab, the knock on the door at midnight continues. Taking you from your homes in front of your parents and handcuffing you continues. Putting the bag over your head continues. The disappearance into the maze of police stations where the parents will not know in which police station his or her son is kept continues. The torture continues. The only thing which has gone down is the bullet in the head. Ultimately, your son at some stage will be released or will be caught up in some case. For the rest of his life, he'll be fighting those cases and he'll lose his mental balance. The terror in the Punjab, make no mistake about it. The killings have gone down, but the terror continues. And it is as bad as before. Because they will ruin the life of the person arrested, they will ruin the lives of his brothers and sisters, and they will ruin the lives of his family. They will never be the same again. And that is a very dark side of India which is little known. And in the areas where the Adivasis live, the corporations have come there in very large numbers to mine India's wealth. But it's the land of the indigenous people, it's the land of the tribals and the Adivasis. They have come there to mine. And they have come there with the paramilitary forces. And at gunpoint, the Adivasis are told to leave. And that is the reason why we human rights activists are fighting for the rights of the Adivasis in those areas. Violence is a continuing issue in our country. I want to quickly say two things before I finish, before I make my concluding remarks about Sajjan Kumar's case, and of course about Buller's case. On the riots in Delhi, we have lost actually quite a bit, in the sense that government was not serious about prosecution, and many of the accused will go away scot-free. But there is one rascal who will get caught, and that is Sajjan Kumar, I feel. And our Fulka Saab, you might have heard him speak from time to time, our Fulka Saab, like a lion, is fighting and not allowing any mistake to take place there. Many mistakes have taken place in the prosecutions of those people, many mistakes. But in Sajjan Kumar's case, the eyewitnesses have very boldly spoken up against Sajjan Kumar. And God willing, if the trial goes on the way it is going on, Sajjan Kumar will go behind bars. On Buller's case, we have some bad news in the sense that Buller got the death sentence, as you know, by a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court. But I must tell you very briefly about what the senior most judge who dissented, what he said. He said Buller's case hangs on a thread. It is based solely on a confession. Not a confession to a judge, a confession to a police officer. This confession is not worth the paper on which it is written. Forget death sentence. Forget life imprisonment. Forget conviction. I would acquit this man. And he made one year. And he made one of the finest dissents that I have seen in a criminal law judgment. I would acquit this man. He does not deserve to remain in jail a day more. But the other 2 judges formed the majority opinion, and he has been sentenced to death. Mercy petition rejected. Things do not look good. But there are, my friends, certain things that we are planning to do. Some of those things we cannot actually say very openly in public. Certain strategies that we will follow. And it is our struggle today to prevent Mullah, in the first instance, to prevent Mullah from going to the gallows. And if we can, to have him acquitted and set free. It is a very uphill task. I want to end by saying that it is now today in India, we are in a situation where it is like a second national movement. I call upon all of you, I urge all of you to join in this new movement. The first national movement was to get rid of the British. But unfortunately, over the years, we have put in place people who are worse than the British. My colleague Manoj Mitta, who spoke here, I think last year or the year before last, talked about General Dwyer, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Hundreds of people were killed, thousands were wounded. But General Dwyer was cashiered and punished, kicked out of the British Army. But in India today, as I said, we are worse than the British. No question of punishment. We will give you a medal of honor, and we will give you high positions in government so that you can continue with the injustices that you have done. It is a new social movement for a new social order, where we don't want this economic model to prevail anymore. We want growth. We respect business. We respect industry, but growth with honor, growth with dignity, growth with spiritualism, growth with morality. It is not easy to do, because our community in India today, our politicians in India today are ruthless. Globalization means growth at any cost, make money at any cost, break any rule, pollute any river, cut any tree, do what you want, bribe any politician. Your mantra, your God is money. Forget morality, forget spirituality. The spiritualism of India, the greatness of India, lies in the spiritualism of its people, irrespective of faith. What we have inside us, the desire to do good for society at large, that spiritualism is dying. It is there among the common people and the people who suffer injustice. We have to harness that spiritualism and move for a revival in India. Not easy, because that revival, like the national movement against the British, will take our lives. And Khalra Sahib lost his life in that spiritual rejuvenation, growth of a new India with morality and a new vision. We have to build that new nation together, all of us. Particularly important, again, as Navkiranji said, is the youth of our country must be now mobilized. They are the next generation of visionaries. They are next future leaders of India. And I want to ask you to consider sending them to India. They must come. They must come to Punjab. They must come to Dantewada. They must go to Kashmir, where everybody is shouting Azadi, Azadi, Azadi. Why? But they must come and see. They must go to Manipur. They must travel with an open mind. Nobody must tell them what they must do, what they must think. They must just come and see India. And understand the beauty of India is in struggle, that people are struggling with no resources, willing to give their lives to make India a better place. Send your young people to India. Not on any radical cause, not to do any shouting, not to do any sloganeering, not to do anything excessive. Just come and see. Come back to your roots once again. Come back to the Punjab and see what is happening. Sex selection, farmer suicides, torture matters, all kinds of issues. Environmental issues, declining water table, sorrow and suffering among certain categories of people. Come to the Punjab and see India. Because they will come back with ideas as to what they can do to help the human rights movement in India. Yesterday's paper had this marvelous picture, I want to say, about what happened in Parliament, in the Canadian Parliament. But before I tell you a little bit about that, I want to say that I am not making this statement because I want to make any political statement. This is not a political meeting. And I do not want to suggest that I or anybody of my friends are for or against any particular political party in India. But yesterday, a 22-year-old girl, Canadian girl, Bridget, when Parliament started, she stood with a sign, as you have seen, probably in the national newspaper. She stood with a sign. You know what the sign said, I don't want to repeat it. She stood with a sign, and she was quietly escorted off the stage, off the place. Creativity, rebelliousness, and self-thought of a young person, the hallmark of change of a society. And I want to read to you what she said. She said, this country needs a Canadian version of an Arab Spring, referring to the Arab Revolution taking place. This country needs a Canadian version of an Arab Spring, a flowering of popular movements that demonstrate the real power to change things lie in the hands of the people. When we act together in our streets, neighborhoods, and workplaces. 22-year-old Bridget. Kalra Saab said something in his speeches which I want to end with that. He was asked why it is he wants to go back to India when there is darkness everywhere. He said, and I hope my translation of what he said in Punjabi is correct, he said, true, there is darkness everywhere, but I want to be like a diya. In the area around me, I will throw light, even though there is darkness everywhere. It's my duty to be a little diya and throw light. And if I can take that forward, if you and I and every one of us here today, if all of us are little diyas and we burn in our own areas, we will not need the sun, ladies and gentlemen, to dispel the darkness. We are the sun.